And now to Dr. Deetra Walsh. I'll merely mention a PhD in sociology, master in rural development, and has worked abroad at UiT, the Arctic University of Norway, with which she's still affiliated, with a special lens on rural communities in our country. What a thrill. Deetra, welcome to the screen.
Wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Next slide, please. In the next 4 minutes or so, I take up the following thesis. For women to lead at the municipal level, we need to create the spaces that make their leadership possible and probable. Now, I know this is not a new thesis. We continue to advocate for change because municipal spaces, like many others, were designed and coded to benefit patriarchal colonial systems, and they still are. Municipal spaces struggle to see, accommodate, and invite women and gender diverse people in. Next slide, please. I work for Municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador, as you would have seen on the slide and in my bio. MNL, as we know it, is an organization representing 275 municipalities in our province. We are guided by a 12-person board of directors who are municipal leaders. And for the first time in MNL's history, and you can see them here, our board president and vice president are both women. A round of applause. Women comprise 30% of municipal councils in our province, and at most, a quarter of our mayors are women. MNL is doing work to make change. In 2017, we created a women's caucus to encourage the participation of more women in the sector and to support the ones who are there. We held our first Women's Leadership Forum in 2019, and we also run the Make Your Mark initiative. Next slide, please. Shortly after the pandemic began, we checked in with the Women's Caucus through a survey about leadership and the impacts of COVID-19. Respondents were both councillors and municipal staff. And one of the questions we asked was, what is your municipality doing to support women during this time? And there were 38 responses to this question. And these responses varied from everything to nothing to mentioning support for women working at home. Now, notably, several respondents acknowledged a lack of an explicit gendered lens, a sentiment echoed throughout the country as COVID unfolded. As one wrote, individual support is happening. However, there is not a gender lens on how women are being impacted and supported. Municipal spaces are not neutral spaces. They are not coded or designed to see women. Next slide, please. At MNL's Fall 2020 convention, former City of St. John's Mayor Shani Duff addressed our Women's Caucus, and we asked her to speak to the theme of why bother running. She had several key takeaways. She said, we bother because we want strong communities. We care. Collective voices influence change, and we need a voice around the table where decisions are made. The sentiment captured by the quote, "That's it, I'm running," at the back of Dr. McGregor's book, Women on the Ballot, is driven by all these reasons as to why we bother. And it may also be driven by what scholar Sarah Ahmed calls feminist snap, and I'll snap my fingers because she does that too. The breaking point, she says, motivation to run is not the problem here. We snap to bother. But there are so many obstacles in the course to get there and to stay there. Municipal spaces are not neutral spaces. They are not coded or designed for us. Next slide, please. I'm encouraged to see that women, men, and those who are gender diverse are calling for change in our sector. Some of the key recommendations include running without financial penalty. People need to be able to run without financial penalty. Being forced to take unpaid leave and or resign from a position, for example, to run in a political campaign does not encourage diverse candidates. Remuneration. At the municipal level, councillors need to be remunerated, and these remunerations need to be treated carefully from an income tax perspective. Support and accommodations. Number 3, people need to be supported and accommodated while on council. Women, for example, need to have access to funding to support childcare while they are attending meetings, even virtual ones. They need childcare to be available for them to access. And finally, number 4, frameworks for good governance. We need clear, solid frameworks for good governance. In this province, this means enabling municipal legislation that puts focus on and supports good governance and codes of conduct, as opposed to seeing municipalities simply as service providers. I return to my thesis. In conclusion, for women to lead at the municipal level, we need to create the spaces that make this possible and probable. We need spaces that work to see and uplift all women, and spaces that invite more gender diverse people in to carry out the governance work that we need to and want to be doing. It is in the design, and we can change it. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Deetra, you've made your mark. Now, I hope a lot of hands are going up to start to run. And by the way, a shout out to the Women's Truckers Federation, who are active in the chat box this afternoon.